Welcome to the guide, Exile. In this series, we're going to be going over the mechanics of the Elder's Guardians and the Elder himself. For this guide, we will just be focusing on his 4 Guardians. As discussed in my War for the Atlas guide, the Elder can be spawned on the Atlas by expanding his influence, the Dark Tentacle background, throughout a subset of maps by completing or killing over 60% of the monsters within surrounding Shaper-influenced maps. These are the maps with the Celestial Star background. Once there are enough maps within the Elder influence subset, somewhere around 20 maps, the Elder will spawn on a random map base within it, along with his 4 Guardians on nearby map bases marked by their icons on the Atlas. The level and tier of all of the encounters is determined by the map base on which the Elder spawns. All of the encounters, Elder and his Guardian, will be the level of the map zone on which the Elder spawns. So this means if the Elder spawns on a tier 5 map, which is a level 72 zone, his encounter and all of the other Guardian encounters of that set will be level 72, regardless of the map base that the Guardians spawn on. The Elder will also ignore shaped map levels and conform to the original level of the map base. The tier and drops of the encounters will be determined by the major tier coloring system on the maps. The Elder follows 3 major tiers of map difficulty: white, yellow, and red. As with the previous level mechanics, this is determined by the map base on which he spawns, again ignoring shaped map mechanics. So revisiting our previous example of the Elder spawning on a tier 5 map, which is a white map, the Elder and Guardian encounters will follow white tier rules regardless of the map base that the Guardians spawn on. The only real major difference for the Guardians and the color of tiers is the number of phases that each Guardian has. Guardians will have the following number of phases for each tier. White, you will have 1 phase, yellow, you will have 2 phases with a breakpoint at 50% Guardian life, and red, you will have 3 phases with a breakpoint at 66 and 33% Guardian life. To actually encounter the Guardians, simply enter the map base that they spawn on and make your way to the boss. The map can be of any rarity and have any modifiers, as they do not apply to the Elder or the Elder Guardian arenas. Once at the boss, the Elder will emerge from a void portal, defeat the boss, and consume his power, and then return to the void. This portal will then lead to the boss arena for the respective Guardian, as designated by their icon on the Atlas. Each Elder Guardian will have 3 different arenas it can spawn in. These appear to be chosen at random and can change if you fail and return on a new map. The arena base that is chosen will not change the Guardian's main moveset, but will add new environmental mechanics that you must be aware of for each phase of the fight. Due to time constraints, I was not able to gather full data on all of the arenas and their respective environmental mechanics for each phase that is possible at each tier. These mechanics are generally areas of ground that deal time damage, such as exploding pods, swirling tornadoes, or cold degeneration balls. I will cover the most deadly of these mechanics within the respective Guardians, but otherwise, these environmental mechanics can and should be avoided entirely. We will be considering the 3 different tiers of Elder that can spawn for our general defense and offense recommendation. All of these tiers of encounters are much easier and much more accessible than the Shaper Guardians, and as such, do not require as extensive defense and offense. Since if we fail the map, we simply have to run another map of that base, which are always cheaper and more available than Shaper and Guardian maps. And once you are set up to take on the Shaper's Guardians, or even the Shaper himself, you will be able to completely face roll all of these encounters and have no issues whatsoever. For defenses, our main defense to consider is our health pool. You'll want to have roughly around the following for each tier of Elder, not considering extensive mitigations. Of course, if you have the correct mitigations and active playstyle, you can get away with much smaller EHP values. Now for the yellow and red tier Elders, you will want to make sure you have some sustainable defense apart from flasks such as leech or regeneration. And second, we want to make sure that we have a fast movement skill to avoid and escape boss mechanics. This is a staple of almost any build. We will discuss further and more specific defenses as we go over each Guardian, as they have special damage types. For offenses, you should focus on having strong single target damage. This will vary per build due to skill interactions, but good gauges are that if you can kill the highest level boss of that map tier color, you should have no problem on that tier of Elder Guardian. These encounters are not timed and do not require you to complete them before an environmental mechanic forces you out, so you can take your time even with lower damage. For this guide, damage values from each of the Guardians was gathered in the following level zones for each tier of the Elder. All damage values shown are average raw damage values before any mitigations have been applied. This means with physical mitigation or capped resistances, these moves will deal significantly less damage. Looking at the gathered damage data, it can be seen that each of the Guardians' damage grows almost linear per zone level. This means that you could extrapolate this data to get a rough estimate of the Guardian's damage at any level. For this guide, I will be using the hard data gathered at these levels for each tier. However, be aware that all damage values shown here are averages, and each move has fairly wide variance. I did my best to sample the most high damage values for the sake of safety. I have also included the Google spreadsheet document that contains all of these values in the description and written guide. Now with that information out of the way, let's discuss each of the Guardians. The Constrictor is a hybrid ranged and melee Elder Guardian, who deals physical damage that always poisons. His poisons are very strong and can stack very quickly with certain moves, making him one of the more difficult Guardians. He can spawn in the following arenas. The Island of Devastation has small green pods that explode and frozen flowers that shatter. The Ruins of Despair has frogs that emerge from the edges of the arena that track to chosen targets and explode shortly after reaching them. The Sea of Isolation is probably the hardest of these, as it has cold degeneration balls in the first phase room. These deal around 1600 cold damage per second, and their degens can stack. They also remain in the arena for the entirety of the phase. For the Constrictor, you will be slowed in all of his arenas at all times with a stacking debuff that reduces your movement speed the longer you stand still. This is shown in the debuff bar in the upper left of the screen, as well as visualized by grasping vines around your character. Simply moving removes this debuff. I recommend making use of the following mitigations. The Constrictor will perform the following moves. A basic melee attack. This deals moderate damage and is not too concerning. Charge Dash. The Constrictor will dash forward at you much like a shield charge, but with a sweeping blade. Sidestep Arrow. The Constrictor will form his two blades together to form a bow, and dash to his side, shooting 4 parallel arrows. Charged Arrow. The Constrictor will stop and begin charging a powerful arrow, emitting a green beamed arrow once released. Its hitbox is quite small and is easily avoided. By 90% health, the Constrictor can begin performing a Blade Flurry type arrow attack. He fires 4 quick flurries of small green arrows over a large area in front of him. These arrows travel in various weaving patterns and can stack poisons very quickly. By 75% health, the Constrictor can begin performing a flying arrow attack. He dashes forward, swiping a large area in front of him, maiming all targets that are hit. This maim will reduce your movement speed by 30%. He then jumps back into the air, firing 4 lines of arrow projectiles at the ground in quick succession. These waves alternate between 5 and 4 projectiles within each line respectively. When they strike the ground, they explode in a small area that can overlap. Aerial Smash. By 50% health, the Constrictor can begin performing an aerial smash. He raises into the air and aims his bow down, firing a large projectile into the ground. This causes an initial hit and an aftershock that emits 8 cascading waves that can also hit. If you are standing in the center or by an edge of a spawned cascade, you can be hit by both. I found this skill to have varied results in registering which portions of the skill hit when standing in its graphic. Ad Spawn. Once below 50% life, the Constrictor will periodically disappear into a mirror arrow cocoon, whilst spawning 4 mirror ads of himself. These attack with melee blades, deal minimal damage, and grant flask charges if they are killed. These will disappear after 10 seconds if they are not killed. This is one of the more difficult Guardians if you are not careful in moving around and managing the poison stacks that are on you. Notable drops from the Constrictor include the Bell Timber Blade and the Growwood Shank. The Enslaver, much like the Constrictor, is a hybrid ranged and melee Guardian. He deals physical and fire damage with deadly ignites from his fire damage that can degen your health in a split second. He can spawn in the following arenas. The Desert of Dementia has physical tornadoes and degeneration storms. The River of Hysteria has fireball projectiles and calldowns that resemble combs in Abarath's arenas. And the Wastes of Lunacy has flame geysers and volatile dead balls. I recommend making use of the following defensive mitigations. The Enslaver will perform the following moves. A basic melee attack. This deals moderate damage and should be avoided. Now the Enslaver has 4 main moves where he throws knives at a chosen target or a ground location. These all deal the same base damage on the upfront knife damage and their after explosion if there is one. Here is the thrown knives damage as well as the thrown knives explosion damage. We will be referring to these damage numbers for the next 4 knife moves. Basic thrown knives. The Enslaver throws a barrage of 3 throwing knife projectiles at his target. These deal physical and fire damage. Sidestep thrown knives. The Enslaver quickly steps to the side whilst throwing 6 pairs of throwing knives at the ground in front of him. These knives deal physical and fire damage. Immediately after, the Enslaver will detonate the pairs of knives in the reverse order that they were thrown. These explosions can overlap and deal pure fire damage. Backstep thrown knives. The Enslaver moves backwards whilst throwing 4 pairs of throwing knives at the ground in front of him. These knives deal physical and fire damage. Immediately after, the Enslaver will detonate the pairs of knives in reverse order that they were thrown. These explosions can overlap and deal pure fire damage. Aerial thrown knives. At 90% life, the Enslaver can begin performing an aerial slam. He ascends into the air, throwing a barrage of knives at the ground in front of him. These knives deal physical and fire damage. Immediately after, the Enslaver will slam into the ground, creating a crater and dealing physical damage in an AoE beneath him. During this time, the pairs of knives that he threw in front of him will detonate in the order that they were thrown. These explosions can overlap and deal pure fire damage. Ad spawn. Once below 50% life, the Enslaver can perform an ad spawn. He will cast 6 molten spiraling balls that break open and spawn floating golem ads. The molten spiraling balls for the ad spawn deal no damage. The ads attack with ranged and melee, deal minimal damage, and restore flask charges if killed. These will disappear after 25 seconds if they are not killed. This Guardian, much like the Constrictor, is one of the more difficult ones if you are not careful in avoiding the throwing knife explosions, and removing the burning ailment. The Eradicator is a ranged-based Guardian that deals pure lightning damage. As lightning damage has a very wide range, the Eradicator's damage can vary greatly, along with the chance of shock being applied. The Eradicator can spawn in the following arenas. The Manor of Madness has lightning-charged spires that connect via lightning and deal lightning damage hits. The Repository of Derision has periodic lightning-infused ground, and the Spires of Delusion has lightning degeneration beams and lightning burst totems. I recommend making use of the following defensive mitigations. As mentioned previously, the Eradicator deals pure lightning damage. Lightning damage, by nature of the game mechanics, has a very wide damage range. This means that his hits can deal more or less than the average damage listed in the guide by a fair margin. Be aware, if he does hit high or critically strike, he can also apply shock, which will increase the damage taken further. Now the Eradicator will perform the following moves. A Circle Blast. The Eradicator will cast blue circle explosions on the ground that can overlap, dealing lightning damage. Their positioning is randomly based around the target of choice. If he winds up a single hand, there will be 2 explosive circles. If he winds up both hands, there will be 3 explosive circles. Lightning Tendrils. The Eradicator will channel the Lightning Tendrils skill for 2 seconds. This deals many small hits in quick succession whilst in melee range. Storm Bolts. At 90% health, the Eradicator can begin to perform a Storm Bolt attack. He will rise into the air while spawning a spinning lightning storm cloud around him. If stood in, the storm cloud will deal rapid lightning damage hits. During this time, the Eradicator will call 6 lightning bolts down upon chosen targets. The last 3 lightning bolts will be called down together and hitting in rapid succession. Hover Tendrils. At 75% life, the Eradicator can begin to perform the Hover Tendrils attack. He will ascend and hover in the air, channeling an empowered lightning tendrils at a chosen target area, as well as below him. These tendril hits can overlap. Ad Spawn. At 75% life, the Eradicator can begin to spawn ads. He will merge into a summoned lightning tentacle orb and move erratically around the arena, emitting lightning balls. The Eradicator is not targetable during this move. These balls deal lightning damage as they travel around, and after 5 seconds, they transform into lightning tentacle ads. These ads attack with range, deal minimal damage, and refill flask charges if they are killed. These will disappear after 20 seconds if not killed. The Eradicator is easier to manage than the previous Elder Guardians, but can be a hassle for many builds that require constant sustain, as the Eradicator frequently performs moves and has arena phases where you cannot attack him, and must run around. Notable drops include the Leper's Alm. The Purifier is a hybrid range and melee guardian that deals physical damage with no ailments. He is the easiest of the guardians for many builds, especially those with good physical mitigations. He can spawn in the following arenas. The Halls of Delirium has timed fire explosions originating from balls that line the arena, the Pits of Sorrow has randomly placed circular explosions, and the Vaults of Insanity has vertical fire degeneration beams. I recommend making use of the following defensive mitigations. The Purifier will perform the following moves. A basic melee attack that deals moderate to high damage. Dual Slam. The Purifier winds up and slams the ground in front of him with both maces in rapid succession, creating 2 overlapping explosions that deal physical damage. These will usually hit within frames of each other, and it will be hard to get hit by only one. For the sake of this guide, I have the average damage for taking both slams. Mace Toss. Purifier will take hold of both maces, move higher into the air, and lob one after another at target locations, creating large area explosions. These explosions deal large amounts of damage. Hover. At 90% health, the Purifier will ascend into the air whilst his maces hover at his back. During this hover, he can perform the following moves. Mace attack and spectral throw. Whilst hovering, the animated maces can perform melee attacks and long-range throws. These moves deal minimal damage and are easily avoided. The thrown mace will only deal damage at its endpoint of its travel, where it explodes and is usually at the edge or outside of the arena. Circle Blast. The Purifier will call down Divine Light Blasts that deal physical damage in a small yellow circle. Crossed Swords. The Purifier will summon 7 tentacle-wielding swords. These will fire in the order that they were summoned, dealing physical damage overlapping at the center. Sword Call Down. The Purifier will call down 16 sword storms on target locations. Each storm of blades will explode once all the swords of that storm have reached their target location. Target locations have a shockwave graphic around the impaled swords that depict the area of effect that the final explosion will damage. No damage is dealt while the swords fall, only once they explode at the end of their travel. These explosions deal heavy damage and can overlap. Ad Spawn. At 75% life, the Purifier can begin summoning adds. He will cast a 5 projectile spell that spawns animated swords that perform basic melee attacks. These adds deal minimal damage and can be killed for flask charges. These will disappear after 20 seconds if not killed. As stated before, this is one of the more easier Guardians due to his more predictable and avoidable moves, along with having access to many easy mitigation methods against his attacks. With the defeat of the Purifier, all of the Elder Guardians have been cleared from the Atlas, removing their influence and leaving just the Elder on his chosen map base. We are now able to enter that map and encounter the Elder at the boss arena within the absence of value and meaning. This will be a challenging encounter for sure. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, Exile.